Welcome back to the September edition of Conversation with Archbishop Kurtz. And in this edition, you will have the benefit of hearing from Annette Turner, who has been the director of the Office of Multicultural Ministry for many, many years. Annette, welcome. And thank you for your presence here today. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you. Okay. Most people are very familiar with your ministry and work, but Annette, through her working with Archbishop Kelly, actually began with the Office of Black Catholics in 1984 and has been now for all those years, which would be 36 years. You must have been in preschool.
I was.
Exactly. So for all those years, you have been so good in your leadership throughout the Archdiocese, and let me add, throughout the country. And so I thank you so much for that leadership. Deacon James Turner, your husband, has been equally involved in ministry, as have the rest of your family. You have 2 children, 4 grandchildren. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
And a very active member of St. Martin de Porres Parish.
Yes.
So Annette, welcome and thank you for your presence. Here we are in September. We're in the midst of all the challenges that have occurred with what I call the ugly head of racism being raised throughout our nation, certainly throughout our commonwealth and city, and even within our church. And so it's very timely for us to talk a little bit about this. People will be interested. Tell us a little bit about your own journey and your own story. How'd you get to Kentucky?
Well, actually, my husband was in military services, going to school in Virginia, and I met him there, and he wanted to come back home to live, while I really wanted to stay in the military. Right. Where he wanted to come home. So that's how we journeyed back to Louisville.
Yeah, and Louisville is his home.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so your work, how did you end up saying yes to Archbishop Kelly to be involved with really the early stages, the foundations of the office, what at that time was called Office of Black Catholics?
Yes. Actually, I had taught at St. Denis and left there, and I was doing some other things, and I was asked to lead the first initiative with a paid staff member to do, I'm going to use the word inner city youth ministry. It was Region 1, but it was beyond Region 1 because it also included the rural community, the black parishes. And my commitment was for 3 years, because I thought if I can't get it done in 3 years, then,
So it's 3 times 10 plus. Exactly. Wow, 3 years. Yeah.
And so I was doing some freelance work, and I was in Milwaukee, leadership development types of things with that diocese, and received a call. And I said to the Archbishop, well, let me think about it, and I'll get back with you. And within 4 days, he called again. And I said, when I returned to Louisville, we would talk about it, because I really did not have the full scope of what it meant to provide leadership for Black Catholics at that time. And I did say yes, and my learning began the moment that I said yes.
And isn't that true, though, for any ministry within our church? Is we begin with blessings that come from our family, our faith, the people who've influenced our lives, but then once we start to work in ministry, through the grace of Christ, we deepen and learn about what we're doing. So I'm glad to hear you say that. And your work has been involved multicultural in many aspects. And I can't think of a parish within the Archdiocese, 110 parishes, that has not been touched by the ministry that either you personally gave or you have directed through others. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about the ministries as you kind of capsulize what's happened over these years.
Okay. As you know, we started out with a focus on Black Catholics, and then we moved from Black Catholics to a multicultural perspective, which also provided an umbrella for African American ministries, African ministries, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, Hispanic ministry at the time,
Is that like early 90s or late 80s?
It would have been, multicultural would have been in the late 90s.
The late 90s, okay.
But it provided an opportunity for all of our diverse communities and our rural community to really have a voice and also to be served.
Yeah.
And so I think if anything, one of the greatest gifts that this office has given us as an archdiocese is the many faces in God's house.
Ah, that's beautiful. And there's a richness to the diversity, because with the work that you've done, you've brought out the unique gifts that not only individuals, but people in their cultural background bring in richness. And to be able to receive those gifts has been great. And also, I have to say, as an advocate, you've been willing to say, well, now here's something we as a church or as a nation need to do. So thank you for that. Right now, we're, of course, in the midst of so many challenges with regard to the sins of racism, the issue of division within our country and within even our communities. And in the midst of all of that, you and I have been talking about the fact that this year is going to be kind of like a progressive meal where there are certain things we think we should do, but we're probably 6 months from now going to learn a little more about what are other things that we need to do, and anything worth doing is worth beginning, and it's also worth deepening and planning. But you've heard from parishes.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about those experiences.
Well, I'd just like to say that while we are attempting to do some new things, we are expanding on other things that we've been doing for over 30 years. Like moving toward oneness, junior cultural awareness, days of reflection, you name it, we've done it. And now the present time, the focus really is lending itself to a specific issue, and that issue being racism.
Yeah.
While in the earlier years, it was about diversity and our call to recognize the gift of diversity, and now we're called to look at where we are insofar as eradicating the sinfulness of racism.
Yeah, and systemic racism. The next edition that I'll do after we complete our conversation will be going in a little more depth with our church teaching on that. But you've been given great leadership with regard to that. And also, I have to say, you've located it very much in Catholic social teaching and reminding people this is part of our faith. We're not, this is not an extra thing, or would be nice to do this. This is central to the life of our faith, people have a great appreciation and an admiration for you. I gotta say, one of my favorite things has been the leadership banquet. In March. It's usually in March, and this year was right before COVID started, and it was no shock to me. So thank you for raising up leaders, especially from the African American Catholic community. I love everyone that's being honored, but those young people, where do you get them? How do you locate these fine young people?
They come from parishes. The parishes lift their names up and send them to the office.
Wow. Someday I'd love to have somebody do a little bit of a tracking. We're tracking out COVID of everything. So, but thank you. These interviews go too fast. Annette, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing and for this conversation that we've had today. And I know we're going to have more as the time goes on.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of this edition of Conversation with Archbishop Kurtz. Please stay tuned for the third and final edition for September.